Okay, so picture this. You've just checked into this gorgeous old hotel, that pine with like chandeliers and maybe even a grand staircase.
Mm-hmm.
You get up to your room, start unpacking, and then you get this feeling like you're not alone,
Yeah.
but not the kind of not alone where you can hear like the TV from next door.
Right.
It's different. It's, well, spooky.
Oh, yeah. That primal feeling that something unseen is sharing your space, it seems to be something that's, well, common to pretty much every culture. I mean, it's no wonder that haunted hotels have just like totally captured our imaginations for, well, forever.
And tonight we're doing a deep dive into 3 hotels that are known for being especially active. We've got the Copper Queen in Bisbee, Arizona. We've got the Oliver House,
Also in Arizona.
also in Arizona.
Yeah.
And then all the way over to Savannah, Georgia, to the Marshall House.
And what we're going to do is go beyond the usual ghost story. So we've got firsthand accounts, yeah, but also we're going to look into some historical records, even some research into paranormal theories, just to see if we can sort of figure out what makes these places such hotspots.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
Let's unpack this, starting with the Copper Queen.
Yeah.
It was built in 1898, and originally it was for those rich mining investors.
Oh, wow.
But eventually it became a social hub for all kinds of travelers.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like some of those guests never actually checked out.
Right. The Copper Queen is, well, it's fascinating because the hauntings range from, I don't know how to put it, mischievous to tragic. Take Julia, for example. I mean, her story it's really heartbreaking. She was a sex worker back in the early 1900s. And, well, she took her own life after a love affair went bad.
Yeah, but here's where things get really interesting. Because the reports about Julia aren't, like of a sad, mournful spirit.
Yeah.
Guests, especially male guests, describe her as, well, flirtatious. She even appears to, get this, dance seductively at the foot of their beds.
It really makes you wonder if, I don't know, if these residual energies, these imprints of, well, of who we were in life, carry aspects of our personalities into whatever, comes next.
If those walls could talk, right?
Right.
Now, on a totally different note, there's also Billy. He's a ghost of a young boy who drowned in the San Pedro River.
Oh, wow.
And what's interesting about Billy is that he mostly interacts with children.
Really?
Yeah. There are all these accounts of kids who are staying at the Copper Queen,
Yeah.
and they make an imaginary friend, and they name him Billy.
Oh.
A friend who tends to move your toys and giggle in the hallways.
It's really both heartwarming and a little creepy at the same time.
I know. But
Yeah.
Billy isn't the only resident ghost with a playful side.
Yeah.
We've also got the man in the top hat. He's frequently seen on the 4th floor, always smoking a cigar.
I've heard of him. He seems to be more of an observer, just watching all the comings and goings of the hotel. And nobody can agree on who he actually is, which makes him even more mysterious.
All right, let's shift gears now and go over to the Oliver House, which was also built in Arizona in 1908.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Copper Queen, it started out as a place for investors, but then it became a boarding house for miners.
Right.
But unlike the Copper Queen, the Oliver House has this, I don't know, much darker energy to it. Some guests even say the way it's built, with that overgrown bridge going up to the entrance,
Yeah.
feels ominous.
You're not kidding. And then there's the history there. Like in 1920, there was this, well, brutal murder right there in the hotel. This miner named Nathaniel Anderson was shot like multiple times and who owed him money.
Oh, wow.
And to make things even more complicated, the guy was also having an affair with Anderson's wife.
You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, and it really kind of reflects how rough these mining towns were back then. Life was just hard. There was a lot of tension. And, well, debts, as you can see, sometimes had deadly consequences.
And that's not even the worst of it. In 1932, the Oliver House was the scene of a mass murder that just shocked the whole town.
Oh, yeah. It was just horrific. A husband found out that his wife was cheating on him, and, well, he went on a rampage.
Oh, my God.
Killed her lover, and 10 other people who were in the hotel, and then he killed himself.
That's just unimaginable. And it seems like these tragedies have really left a stain, especially in the rooms where the murders happen.
Yeah, what's interesting is how some locations can be focal points for this kind of energy, almost like a recording of the past that just keeps playing over and over.
Oh, wow. Guests in room 13, that's where Nathaniel Anderson was found, they often say that they feel like they're being watched, or they hear footsteps, and some even say they've seen his apparition. And then you've got the blue room where the mass murder took place. Guests say that it just feels incredibly heavy, like there's this negative energy. And they say furniture moves, there are screams in the night, just an overwhelming feeling of dread.
Okay, and now things get even stranger with these reports of a specific room at the Oliver House
Uh-huh.
where guests say they feel physical sensations, like their arms or legs falling asleep or being touched or even pulled.
Oh, wow.
Some even say it could be a portal, like a door to somewhere else.
Right. The whole idea of portals is really complicated, and I think we should definitely get into that more a little later on. But for now, let's move from the Arizona desert over to the graceful but definitely creepy streets of Savannah, Georgia.
I'm with you. Okay, so the Marshall House. It was built in 1851, and it's one of Savannah's oldest hotels that's still open.
Wow.
And it's got just as much tragic history as the Arizona hotels. Maybe even more. Absolutely. You see, the Marshall House was actually a hospital during the Civil War. And not only that, it was a hospital during 2 different yellow fever epidemics.
Oh, my gosh.
Just imagine all the suffering, the loss of life that happened within those walls.
It's heavy to even think about. So it's not surprising that there's so many stories of ghostly activity. Guests see apparitions of soldiers missing limbs.
Oh, gosh.
They see doctors rushing down the hallways. They even see children playing, even though there aren't any children staying at the hotel.
That's pretty eerie. One apparition that people always talk about is this man holding his severed arm, begging for help. It's a really haunting image.
Right.
And it speaks to the just brutal realities of the Civil War and the way trauma can, well, stick around even after death.
It's enough to give you chills. And it's not just these visual apparitions. Guests say they feel like they're being touched, like a nurse is taking care of them. Cold hands on their foreheads or arms.
Yeah, and then you have the classic poltergeist stuff, right? Doors rattling, toilets flushing on their own, lights flickering, faucets turning on and off, the kinds of things that make you question if you're really seeing what you think you're seeing.
But maybe the most disturbing thing about the Marshall House is that, back in the late 90s when they were doing renovations, they found skeletal remains, like specifically amputated limbs.
Oh my gosh. It's a really grim reminder of the hotel's past as a Civil War hospital, and it makes those stories about the ghosts searching for their missing limbs a lot more believable.
It does. And it looks like some rooms are more active than others. Rooms 214, 314, and 414, they're known for just, a generally oppressive atmosphere and this awful smell that they can't seem to get rid of no matter how much they clean.
Yeah, it's almost like the energy from what happened there just soaked into those spots. I've even heard the staff tried playing gospel music in those rooms to, I guess, try to change the energy.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. And speaking of room 414, that's the same room number as one that has reports of activity at the Copper Queen.
Really?
Yeah. And this listener, Misty, shared her story of staying in, room 409 at both hotels.
Hold on. Did you say 409 at both the Copper Queen and the Marshall House? That's a really strange coincidence.
I know, right? And Misty's story is just wild. She and her husband experienced everything from flickering lights and this hairbrush that moved on its own to a missing key card that showed up under a really heavy tray.
Sounds like a mischievous spirit to me. They like to move things, hide things, almost like they're playing games.
Yeah. And then there's this whole nickel in the shoe thing. They'd been using cards for everything, and Missy's husband is like super picky about what goes in his shoes.
Right.
So where'd the nickel come from?
Nickel, you say? Well, that's interesting because nickels were pretty common back in the 1800s when the Marshall House was, a busy place. It could be, an echo of the past, a spirit trying to connect with the present.
Oh, that's a good point. It's like a message from beyond.
Mm.
But things get really, really spooky with Misty's late night experience.
Oh.
She wakes up and she hears her husband going to get ice, but then she realizes that he's still fast asleep next to her.
Whoa. And then what?
And then the TV turns off by itself.
Yeah.
That feeling of not being alone, especially when you're in bed in a place that's supposed to be safe.
Yeah.
That's got to be terrifying.
It is.
And then there's the voice she hears. It tells the dog to be quiet. And it even uses the dog's nickname.
Oh, hold on. How would a random spirit know the dog's name?
Exactly. And it gets even weirder. Misty's nephew said he saw a woman in a white gown standing by the creek near their house after their trip.
No way.
And they live on 7 acres of land, far from any roads.
And her husband's been having chills ever since they got back from Savannah.
Yep. Makes you wonder if they brought something back with them.
Yeah.
Like a souvenir they didn't want from the Marshall house.
That's a vacation they won't forget. But we're just getting started. We're going to dive deeper into Misty's story and explore the connections between the Copper Queen and the Marshall house.
Oh, yeah?
And we're going to take a closer look at the whole portal thing, the theories behind them, and if there's any science to back it up.
Ooh, this is good. Don't go anywhere. Because there's so much more to uncover in this deep dive into the world of haunted hotels.
So let's go back to Misty's experience for a second. In room 409 at the Marshall house, right? You mentioned like a few details, but her whole story it's pretty crazy.
It really is. And kind of scary, if you ask me. It's like she won the paranormal lottery or something, you know. She experienced all the classic signs of a haunting in just one trip.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with those flickering lights. That's pretty common in places that people say are haunted. Some say it's because the spirits can mess with electromagnetic fields.
Oh, that's a whole other deep dive right there. But okay, for now, let's stick with Misty. So the lights were just the beginning, and then her husband couldn't find his key card. Like, he looked everywhere.
And then, boom, it just shows up under this heavy silver tray. Sounds like a poltergeist to me.
Right.
Moving stuff, hiding things. It's like they think it's funny or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the whole nickel in the shoe thing. They'd only been paying with cards. And her husband is like, seriously, super careful about what goes in his shoes. So where'd the nickel come from?
A nickel, huh? Well, that makes me think because nickels were, they were everywhere back in the 1800s when the Marshall house was the place to be. Maybe it's a little piece of the past. Maybe a spirit was trying to, I don't know, get their attention.
That's interesting. It's like a little time capsule message, but from, the other side.
Yeah.
But then things get even spookier. So Misty wakes up in the middle of the night, and she hears her husband going to get ice, but then she realizes that he's still sound asleep next to her.
Whoa. Okay, so what happened?
And then the TV turns off by itself. That feeling that you're not alone, especially when you're in bed, in a place that's supposed to be safe.
Yeah.
That's got to be terrifying.
No kidding. And then what about the voice she heard? The one that told the dog to be quiet.
Right. And even used the dog's nickname. I mean, how would a random spirit know that?
That's the part that gets me. It seems like, I don't know, there was some awareness there, some intelligence that goes way beyond things just like randomly happening.
Right. It's not like a door slamming or lights flickering. This is something actually interacting with them.
Right.
And it knew stuff about them.
Yeah.
And then there's Misty's nephew. He said he saw a woman in a white gown standing by the creek near their house after their trip.
And they live on 7 acres of land?
Yeah, 7 acres, far from any roads.
And her husband has had the chills ever since they got back. Makes you think of something, I don't know, latched onto them at the Marshall house and followed them home. The whole idea of spirits attaching themselves to people or things, that's like a big thing in, all the ghost stories and stuff.
Yeah, it's creepy. Makes you think twice about staying in these old hotels.
Right.
But, okay, back to the Marshall house for a second. You were talking about those specific rooms that are haunted, 214, 314, and 414. What makes them so different from the other rooms?
Well, besides that awful smell, which, some people think it's because it used to be a hospital, those rooms seem to have the most, intense activity. Guests feel that sense of dread. They see things. They hear voices. Some even say they feel like physical sensations.
It's weird how they're on different floors, but they all have the same last 2 digits in the room number. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like there's a line of energy going straight up through the building or something.
That's an interesting thought. Like there's some kind of link between those spots, and that's where all the, weird stuff happens.
Okay, that's a little creepy. Speaking of connections, remember how both the Marshall house and the Copper Queen have people saying they hear kids laughing even when there aren't any kids staying there?
Oh, yeah. And in both cases, it seems like those kid spirits are more playful than scary. Like they're reliving happy memories and don't even realize that, well, they're not really here anymore.
Yeah, it is kind of sad and fascinating at the same time. These kids just always playing, always stuck in those places.
Makes you think about what happens after we die, doesn't it? Like, do our personalities, our memories, do they just stick around?
It does. And there's another connection, too. The whole missing limbs thing.
Oh, yeah.
At the Copper Queen, guests feel their clothes being tugged at, like, little kids' height. Like little Billy is reaching out. And at the Marshall house, it's those soldiers with arms and legs missing.
It's like trauma leaves a mark, even after death. It's like they're still carrying those experiences and can't let go.
Makes you wonder if they're, like, trapped by that trauma.
Yeah.
Or if they're trying to, I don't know, tell us something, like share their stories.
Right. Now, that brings us to the whole portal thing, something we talked about earlier. Room 409 seems to be like a paranormal magnet at both the Copper Queen and the Marshall House. And some believe that rooms like that are portals, like thin spots between our world and, well, something else.
Okay, so what's a portal exactly?
hmm
Is there any, like, actual science behind them? This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah, well, people have been talking about portals for like forever. They say they're like gateways or doors to other dimensions, other realities. Some people think they're just natural, connected to specific places or energy fields. Others think people can make them on purpose using rituals or even technology.
Okay, so what about the science part?
That's where it gets tricky. Science hasn't really found any proof that portals exist the way people describe them. But there are some areas of physics, like quantum mechanics and string theory, that suggest that there might be multiple dimensions, parallel universes, that kind of thing.
So even though we can't say for sure that portals are real, science isn't like ruling them out completely.
Exactly. We still don't know a lot about the universe and, what's really real. Maybe all these stories about portals, about people feeling like they're shifting between realities. Maybe that's just us getting a glimpse of something that's, well, beyond what we understand right now.
It definitely makes you think. So we've talked about all this paranormal stuff happening in these hotels, but what about the hotels themselves? Could the way they're built, the history, the materials they used, could that have something to do with it?
That's a great question. And it's definitely something that, people who investigate the paranormal think about. Some believe that certain materials like iron or quartz can like conduct energy or make it stronger, which could make a place, more attractive to spirits. Others think it's about how the building is laid out. Like maybe there are certain patterns or alignments that create these paths for energy to flow through.
So it's not just about, like, who or what might be haunting a place, but also the actual building itself.
Exactly. And don't forget about history, too. The things that happen in these hotels, the people who lived and died there, all that energy, all those emotions, they can leave a mark.
It's almost like these places soak up the energy of the past, and it's just trapped there like echoes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And some say that some people are more sensitive to those echoes, and that's why they have those experiences that we think of as, being haunted.
So it's like a bunch of different things coming together: energy, history, and how we perceive things.
That's a great way to put it. It's not just one thing. It's a whole bunch of stuff mixed together that makes these places so interesting and so mysterious and, yeah, sometimes kind of scary.
Wow, we've really covered a lot tonight, from those playful kid spirits to the scary apparitions and the tragic history of these hotels, and even like the whole idea of portals.
Yeah, and we've seen some pretty interesting connections between the Copper Queen and the Marshall House, especially with that room 409. It seems to be a real hotspot in both places.
It's hard to believe that's just a coincidence.
Yes.
It really does make you wonder if there's something about that specific room number, or maybe where those rooms are in the buildings that's attracting all this weird stuff.
It's a good question. Some
Yeah.
people believe that numbers have like special vibrations and that some numbers are connected to, I don't know, certain types of energies or entities.
So you're saying like maybe 409 is just like a number that lines up with the spirit world. That's pretty out there.
It is. But whether it's, numbers or the layout of the building or something else we haven't even thought of, it shows us that we really don't know much about what's going on with all this stuff.
That's what I love about it. For me, the most fascinating part of all this is the possibility that there's more to the world than we can see.
Absolutely. I mean, these stories make us rethink how we see the world and even ourselves. They make us face the unknown, and they make us question what we think we know about life and death and what might be out there.
It's kind of scary, but it's also exciting, isn't it?
Yeah,
To think that we might be sharing this world with things we can't even see or really understand.
it really is. And it makes you ask those big questions, right? Like, what's our place in all of this? And
Yeah.
and are we all connected in some way even after we die?
That's a beautiful way to put it. And maybe, just maybe, if we try to understand these stories, these hauntings, we can learn more about ourselves and the mysteries of just existing.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe if we open our minds to these other realms, these other possibilities, we can appreciate life even more and appreciate the unseen forces that might be all around us.
I like that. So what have we learned? What's the takeaway from all this deep dive into haunted hotels?
Well, I think it reminds us that every place has a story.
Hmm.
Every building holds on to memories, and every life leaves a mark. And sometimes those marks, well, they stick around. They echo through time in ways that we might not get.
It's like those hotels are alive in a way, holding on to their pasts.
Yeah.
And those spirits, those energies, they're all part of it. They're woven into the very fabric of those places.
And their stories, they remind us that life is precious, that what we do matters, and that even after we're gone, our energy might still be out there touching other people's lives in ways we can't even imagine.
That's a powerful thought. It makes you want to be more mindful of every place you go, knowing that there might be more going on than you realize.
It does. And it makes you think about the places you've been, the hotels you've stayed in. Have you ever felt that, that chill that you can't explain, or felt like you were being watched, or seen something weird out of the corner of your eye?
Now that you mention it.
Yeah.
But we'll save those stories for another time. Well, that's it for our deep dive this week, but the exploration, the wondering, the questions, that never really ends, does it?
Nope. The world is full of mysteries, and it's our job to keep looking, keep learning, and keep exploring.
If you enjoy this trip into the world of haunted hotels, don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive. We've got lots more explorations of the unexplained coming up. And if you have any spooky stories of your own, be sure to share them with us. Never know, we might just feature your story in our next deep dive.
Until then, stay curious, keep an open mind, and remember, sometimes the best stories are the ones we can't quite explain.